Gentlemen, before I formally present to you on the Africa as an emerging epicenter of terrorism, let me ask my colleague, my precious colleague and friend, uh, Dr. Emeka, to speak to you a little bit about the book that we have written. Dr. Emeka is a remarkable man because he has worked with me for more than 2 years on this book, and he has assembled 25 continental experts on terrorism. And we are very happy to share our research with you. Okay, Dr. Emeka, please speak.
All right. Thank you, Rohan. And thank you, the Horn of Africa Institute for Peace and Security Studies. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be on your channel this afternoon for this very important conversation on the terrorist challenge in Africa. Previously, I thought it was your institute was the same that Horn of Africa Institute of Strategic Studies, but very much later I got it clarified. Now, as Rohan said, we worked on this book for a couple of years, about for 3 years before it eventually got published. And the important thing was that this book is unfortunate. It's interesting that Rohan is here to get his own copy, but this have a copy here, so it is real, and it's very much accessible online. Now, the truth of the matter, this book has about 27 chapters, well-informed chapters. It's not just giving historical background, it conducts a prognosis into the future, as if we envisage what was going to happen this time around. And it was motivated, the idea of the book was motivated to inform and to guide policy and strategy with respect to addressing the terrorism challenge in Africa. Not necessarily economic. I'm just gladdened by the growing visibility on the internet about the book. Now, about 830 pages of literature on the terrorism challenge in Africa by experts. Some are scholars, some are professionals in counterterrorism, some are jurists. We put them together, and the book has we adopted a country by country consign. And this country by country, we targeted those countries that are not just vulnerable, that are hit by terrorist challenge. And then we also knowing that terrorism is not just a one country matter, it's not just domestic terrorism, the international dimension. We also embarked on regional analysis. That's what made it up to 27 chapters. And each is very, very well informed. It shows that the more we work to counter terrorism, the more the terrorists also expand their own network. As we embark on international cooperation to counter the scourge, the terrorists on their own part are embarking on their own international cooperation, leveraging on their own assets. So the work is just quite very, very informative. Now, the details by the comments have come so far, but we got comments from the African Union Commissioner for Peace, for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, to give his impression. He requested for the manuscript, went through it, and wrote very, very pronounced, very, very encouraging impression about the book. Then the series editor of the Paragraph Handbook, also the impression is clearly spelled at the back. Now, it looks at when we are concerned it, by 1999, the OAU, considering events in the last decade of 1990s in the Egypt, in Algeria, in the Bloc of North Africa, and then with terrorist attack in US and in US embassy in Kenya and Tanzania, the African OAU then thought about there was need for us to come together and adopt a convention for the prevention and combating of terrorism in Africa, far back 1999. It's now past over 25 years. We had anticipated that the scourge of terrorism would have decreased or possibly eliminated in Africa. But Africa has risen from an era where terrorism was contained in some part of the continent to spread to virtually every region in the continent. And the threat is increasing. That as at this year, Africa was described as the center of gravity, the new epicenter of global terrorism. It called for concern. And as if based on the concern we had about the continent, we began this book. And I can bet you that the challenge, the content will go a long way in helping policy and scholarship and strategy on how to address the terrorist challenge in the continent. Thank you very much.
Emeka, why don't you just mention the countries?
Okay, specifically in West Africa, we looked at Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, Niger. These are terrorism most vulnerable countries in West Africa. In East Africa, we looked at Kenya, Somalia, we looked at Uganda, and we also looked at Somaliland and Puntland. Somaliland and Puntland has space, even though they've not been recognized entirely as country, but the challenge in that area is very, very peculiar. Now, in Southern Africa, we looked at Mozambique. You can see that Al-Shabaab, the Islamic State, have moved in from Kenya to Tanzania down to Mozambique. In Central Africa, we looked at Cameroon, we looked at Chad, we looked at Democratic Republic of Congo, then in East Africa, we looked at Uganda, also in East Africa. Then in North Africa, we looked at Morocco, we looked at Algeria, we looked at Egypt, and we looked at Libya. So these are some of the areas we went through in across the continent to address, to give into. Then each of these 5 regions, East, West, North, and South, and Central Africa, there were also chapters on those areas. And these chapters try to show that even in those countries that are not directly affected, they're still vulnerable and exposed to risk of terrorism. And in particular, countries like Namibia, which have not really have recorded incident of terrorism, are now concerned that even their financial system could be violated for financing of terrorism. So the output of the book calls all countries in the continent to wake up to the reality. And even if you think it's not happening in your country today, you need to be on the alert and take all measures to ensure that the scourge of terrorism is either reduced or eliminated in the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emeka. Now what I would do is I would speak about the epicenter of terrorism in Africa. Firstly, the shift of terrorism to Africa started in the 1990s. That started in April 1991 when Osama bin Laden traveled from Pakistan to Sudan. So from April 1991, Osama bin Laden lived in Khartoum, Sudan until May of 1996. And during that period, Al-Qaeda started to provide very significant training and support to a number of groups in Africa. And they started with the groups that are in North Africa. So the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and the Islamic Group of Egypt came to Sudan. And there were 2 farms called the Damascene and the Soba farm that bin Laden owned. He provided the initial training to the Egyptians who came there. Other than the Egyptians, there were people from the Moroccan Islamists, the Libyan Islamists, and also the Moroccans, the Tunisians and the Libyans, they came. So initially Maghreb or the North Africa was the main focus. So what we saw was the training that took place in Sudan. And because of the training in Sudan, what we saw was that the groups in North Africa were highly capacitated to go and do the operations Firstly, in Somalia, because the 1993 was the turning point for Somalia, but they also built huge capabilities in Africa. So the threat environment in North Africa remained. One of the most violent insurgencies took place in Algeria because the Algerian fighters also moved to Sudan and they formed a group called the GIA. Later, the GIA, the Armed Islamic Group, evolved into GSPC. And this group called GSPC was very aligned to Al Qaeda. So all these groups were eventually co-opted by Al Qaeda, or they built a very close relationship with Al Qaeda. And gradually the threat started to cascade from the Maghreb, that is in North Africa, to the Sahel, that is to Niger, Chad, Mali, Mauritania. And from the Sahel region, it started to go even further down, even up to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Congo. So what we are seeing is the threat moving from the northernmost edge of Africa to the south, further south. Now, other than that, from East Africa and West Africa, there were flows of foreign terrorist fighters. For example, from Asia, we saw a very significant flow of fighters to the Islamic State East Africa province. So most recently, in the operations mounted by the Puntland counterterrorism forces, we saw that the head of the medical wing, of the Islamic State East Africa province, he was from Malaysia. Then a number of Bangladeshi traveled. So I hope all of you can hear me. Are you able to hear me? Yes.
Right.
Yes. So what we have seen is that because the foreign terrorist fighters traditionally moved to the Middle East. Of course, before they moved to Iraq and Syria, they moved to Afghanistan. But what we have seen is a very significant movement now to Africa, because in Iraq and Syria, based on the research that I have conducted, including a recent visit that I made to that part of the world, there are less than 900 Islamic State fighters in Iraq and Syria. They are largely operating in the Anbar Desert, which is between Iraq and Syria. So IS is re-emerging as an entity in Africa. How are they emerging? They have linked up with local groups. For example, we have seen that IS, or the Islamic State, or ISIS, linked up with Al-Shabaab, but they co-opted people who were in Al-Shabaab to break away. So the most recent development we have seen is a man called Abdul Qadir Mumin. He's a Somali national who was in Sweden and in London before. He broke away and then he joined the Islamic State in Somalia, which has since then evolved into Islamic State East Africa province. So this is the most latest development that we are seeing in the Horn of Africa. But if I go back to the earlier period, what we have seen that when Bin Laden was operating in Khartoum, Sudan, Bin Laden capacitated two people to go to Somalia and to train the fighters. The first is Saif al-Adil. Saif al-Adil was the head of Security and Intelligence Committee. And Saif al-Adil from Al-Qaeda moved to Somalia, and he started to build the capabilities of the Somali fighters that took a very important role in the fight. And uh, and what we are seeing is that this particular organization, Al Qaeda, was able to influence Al Shabaab in a significant way, and Al Shabaab is today a the part of the Al Qaeda network of groups. And most recently, what we have seen is that Al Qaeda was able to get Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen to work very closely with the Houthis, the Ansarullah movement in Yemen. Why was that possible? How was that possible? It is because Saif al-Adil, the current leader of Al-Qaeda, that is after bin Laden and after Ayman al-Zawahiri, he moved to Tehran, and he is currently controlled by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. So Saif al-Adil sent his own son to make a rapprochement between the Shia and the Sunni groups in Yemen, and in return, very significant assistance has been given by Saif al-Adil to Al-Shabaab. So we have seen some of the capabilities that has been developed in Iran, including missiles, have now been transported to Al-Shabaab. The capabilities of Al-Shabaab will be very significant in the coming months and coming years. But what I would urge all of you is that we support not only the forces in the Horn of Africa, but particularly in Somalia, and also the Puntland counterterrorism forces. I have recently reviewed their performance, and they are good, but they need help. They need more helicopters, they need more armored vehicles, they need more weaponry, they need more communications and more intelligence capabilities, and they also need more training. But I'm very impressed with their leadership. But I think that there should be a huge capability to build support so that we can get people from around Africa to prepare for this challenge. Africa is a continent of 1.5 million people, 1.5 billion people, and Africa is the second fastest growing region in the world. And with that economic growth, we must help Africa to be able to govern effectively, but also govern in terms of security. So we have to build the security and intelligence capabilities in a very significant way. And finally, the final point that I want to make is this, that is, we have to build not only the kinetic capabilities where we fight fire with fire. That is only 5% of the counterterrorism fight, but 95% should be in prevention, protecting the African people from ideologies coming from overseas, especially from the Middle East. And of course, rehabilitating those who are affected. So I myself traveled to Africa for the first time when I was 16 years old. Since then, I traveled extensively in North Africa, West Africa, and East Africa. So as a result of my travel to Africa, I gathered that the rehabilitation programs are still ad hoc or rudimentary, and we have to build very structured programs. So I asked my colleagues who are present at this meeting from African governments to build your own rehabilitation capabilities, and I am very happy to work with my colleagues to help you to build those capabilities in Africa. Africa has very weak security structures, both in the cyberspace, as we witnessed today, and also in the physical space. So unless we train our colleagues properly, unless we capacitate them, they are not able to ensure that Africa becomes one of the most powerful countries in the 21st century. I have no doubt Africa will, because the African heart is like gold, and we have to build immense cooperation, but beyond cooperation. So I ask you to move beyond cooperation into collaboration and partnership. What do I mean by cooperation to collaboration and partnership? So Admiral Ayo from Nigeria is here. He invited me to visit Nigeria, one of my 3 trips to Nigeria. And during that time, someone asked me this question. So the shift from cooperation to collaboration and partnership is, number 1, build common counterterrorism database for the whole of Africa. Second is build what is called exchange of personnel arrangements. And third is that we have to build joint training capabilities. Now, this event by the Horn Institute with Isaac's leadership and Natasha being the chair of this session is to do a joint training for Army, Navy, Air Force, police, Army, Navy, Air Force, law enforcement, and NGOs and other communities. And finally, we have to make sure that joint training leads to joint operations. And I would also say that we have to share resources, technology, and mostly experience. There are few African governments and colleagues with the expertise to fight. I was very impressed the way some of the countries in Africa fought, especially after Bin Laden's operation to kill Mubarak in Ethiopia in 95. After that, we saw that governments came together and decided enough is enough, and they decided to dismantle these organizations. But unfortunately, that wave of terrorism has re-emerged after the East Africa attacks on the American embassies, where 5,000 people were injured, maimed, and about 200 people were killed. And now we are seeing a second wave, which is the Islamic State wave. And I believe that this is a point for us to come together and work together. And if we don't do that, certainly we will lose Africa. Africa will emerge as a continent of conflict, a continent where people die, people suffer, not a continent of prosperity. But I am hopeful that with the support of all of you, that we will be able to build those capabilities. And I would offer our book as a contribution, Emeka and my book, so that all of you can and will play an important role to strengthen and build a robust infrastructure in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. That was a really great walk through the early origins of terrorism in the continent, up to today's successes, today's ongoing challenges, and even starting to get down into some of the specifics of where those challenges particularly are. What we're going to do now is I'm going to dominate the floor a little bit with you on a couple of questions discussion, but we're very much opening up the floor for everybody. Please type some questions into the chat, and we'll do a combination of taking questions from the chat and also taking some live questions. But I'm going to dominate just for a moment. I think one of the challenges that we have in the world of counterterrorism, and this is a bit of a personal crusade, we tend to be dominated by the global north in terms of trying to prevent the next 9/11, the next Bataclan, the next isolated out-of-country attack. And when we look around the world where the big challenges are, they're not there. Actually, if we look at counterterrorism in the last 20 years, the West has been quite successful at protecting itself. They have ongoing issues, but that's been the success story. The challenge has been in areas where terrorist groups control territory and populations. And you've already touched on the fact that this isn't simply about securitized approaches. It's not simply about military means, although from my perspective, they remain very important. But what we're talking about is really areas where there's high levels of violence. There's exploitation of governance gaps. In the Horn, very clearly borderlands are some of those challenging areas. Borderlands where central government control is physically distanced, where you have real complications of colonial era borders not particularly making sense, and all that goes with that. Challenges of young institutions. You've touched again on the fact that, yes, there are very capable military organizations, policing organizations. There's very advanced legislation and legal frameworks in place. But the step of getting those to work together nationally, regionally, continentally is enormous. It's not something that anywhere in the world has done easily. So those young institutions and long-standing conflict within areas that are easy to manipulate. Any thoughts on how we can get the global approach to prioritize what is actually the biggest challenge and not simply look at, as I said, protecting the West from the next big attack?
Natasha, thank you very much. By way of introduction, I want to tell you that Natasha is based in Somalia. She's a very brave lady. She has worked in other conflict zones. And my respects and a deep tribute to you as I respond to your question. Africa has very long borders, and even the Iraq-Syria border is still very porous. So protecting borders is a huge challenge. But for this, we have to build capabilities, and we have to also make sure that we work with partners who are willing to help us, because there's a lot of technology that is available to protect those borders. So I think that every African country should pair up or twine with a country in the global north, because those are the countries that have the resources, the technology, the discipline, and the staying power, right? So that they can build their own security system. For Africa itself to build their own security arrangements, it will take at least 10 to 20 years' time. But if you have a good partner in the Western world, you can build those capabilities very fast. So that is on the technology side. But on the training side, I believe that we have to build counterterrorism schools that teach not only the operational dimensions, but terrorist rehabilitation, which is a magic weapon. That is, and other than that, we have to build the capabilities for prevention, that is to protect the communities, to ensure there is social cohesion in every African state. So I think that 95% of fighting terrorism is kinetic. 95% is non-kinetic, 5% is kinetic. 95% should be largely community engagement or community approaches. For that, we can develop the skills and the competencies within Africa. Because Africa historically was a land of Sufism. And Sufism was very embracing of all faiths and all traditions, unlike Salafism that came subsequently to Africa. So I ask all of you to work with the religious institutions in Africa to make them your credible partners. I also ask all of you to work very closely with the digital space to create in parallel capabilities for digital intelligence within your own military, law enforcement, and intelligence capabilities, so that you can monitor and secure the digital space. If we don't have experts who can protect the digital space, certainly there will be cyber attacks. And more than that, there will be the terrorist propaganda, fundraising, procurement, training surveillance, all these activities will be conducted online. So we have to equally, as much as we protect the physical space, we have to protect the virtual space.
Thank you. And just because you mentioned social cohesion, I think it's interesting to let this audience know that there is a really interesting initiative across the Horn. And I'm a big believer in the capabilities that exist in the region. Some 5 or 6 years ago, finance ministers across the Horn of Africa came together saying, look, we're all very transparent that this is a region that has conflict, that is not always found it easy to cooperate. And what they created was the Horn of Africa Initiative, which allowed for major development investment across the region to take place in a slightly less politicized arena. Now, that has really ranged from the kind of networks required to have digital connectivity, major road and other thoroughfares, right down to social cohesion and quite hard security aspects of social cohesion and the much softer aspects. So there's a real teaching point that Africa has to give to the rest of the world in terms of what's been going on in the region with that. And it's been very interesting to work alongside some great development partners, but for them to articulate just how little they understood the depth of experience, expertise, and ability to work together across these really complex areas. So some of what you're talking about, I think, is already being constructed, and I would be a really big one to push, yes, partner with Western countries, but also this cross-learning South-South, so that we're not necessarily just creating the very expensive Western systems, which haven't proven to be terribly effective in places like Afghanistan, where I've spent too much time for not very good results for the population there. So just wanted to throw that one up there. And another question I had, and that was really looking at this kind of international movement of foreign fighters that you were articulating. It's something that I know in sort of some of the littoral West African countries, Togo, Benin, at least now 7 years ago, we were starting to track foreign fighters that have been embedded in borderland communities who are now starting to really bring the insurgency south. How can we ensure that that kind of learning, which has now become a really international tactic, is spread, and we can be more proactive in preventing that kind of challenge?
The flow of foreign fighters to Africa is a major, major challenge. So I can tell you from Southeast Asia, fighters have traveled both to the East Africa province of the Islamic State and to the West Africa province of the Islamic State. We even had a Singaporean young boy who was planning to travel to West Africa province, and he was arrested. So, but the Malaysian number has moved to now join the East Africa province, including the head of the medical wing of the East Africa Islamic State province. So this we have to address in 5 ways. One is we have to share information and intelligence. That is why I said, let's build common databases tiered by categories, accessible to all counterterrorism agencies, law enforcement, military, and intelligence. This is something you can do because in ASEAN, I helped to build our ICE, which is the Regional Intelligence Network. I was the architect of that network after Indonesian Defense Minister requested that we build a system after the famous ISIS siege of Marawi. So I think that today, Africa, it is the right time for the African governments to build a common database because the borders are so porous. And unless we have a common database, we can't. And there must be partners from Asia, Africa, Middle East, and the West who are members of this data sharing arrangement. Second is there must be exchange of personnel. There must be Europeans who are based in significant number in Africa, because many of the foreign terrorist fighters who are now coming to Puntland to fight in Puntland, they are coming from Europe, but they are of African origin, they are of Middle Eastern origin, they are of Asian origin. Africa has become the new theater because it's very difficult for them to enter Iraq or Syria, and even when they come, they will be apprehended or they will be killed. If they enter Syria, they will certainly be killed. If they enter Afghanistan, certainly Taliban will capture them. So Asia and the Middle East is a very hostile terrain for foreign terrorist fighters today. And today, Africa is becoming the ideal terrain for foreign terrorist fighters. So I believe that there must be very good intelligence sharing arrangements. This is the first. Second is we have to develop very high quality, high grade intelligence. That means we have to train our colleagues in Africa. We have done some training, but that is inadequate. I think that I've spoken to one of my colleagues who is now coordinating intelligence in Africa. And what she said was that we need greater capacity. So I'm asking all of the government representatives here, take this as your challenge and build the training schools, the training academies, where you train them on what is terrorism, how terrorism developed in Africa, how terrorism has developed in other parts of the world, how other countries have succeeded, how other countries have failed in the fight. So the second is the training side. The third is that we have to develop what is called multi-agency systems. That is, we can't have the army or military operating separately from the national intelligence services and the police operating separately. They must all come under one roof. There must be joint intelligence-led operations centers. If we don't work together, we are finished. So this is the third aspect of fighting foreign terrorist fighters. I myself have more than 300-400 foreign terrorist fighter names that I'm happy to share with all of you. And I think it is something that is important for you because they continuously travel. Those days they went to Bosnia, they went to Kashmir, then they went to Afghanistan, then they moved to Iraq and Syria, right? Next destination is Africa. So there's a free floating pool of fighters. And the fourth, I would say, is that we have to build very good national cooperation. That is, for there to be international cooperation, the building blocks should be national cooperation between the immigration services, the identity card services, the registration of motor vehicles that service, police, prisons. There must be very good, the building blocks of cooperation within the country should be strengthened. Only then we can look for international cooperation. So cooperation with foreign counterparts is dependent on the cooperation within the sister services. This is one. And finally, what I would say is send your best brains to study overseas. Send them to another country so that they will come with fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. For example, we have seen in the last 5 years, significant movement of money, cryptocurrency from the Horn of Africa to even to Afghanistan for the Abbey Gate bombing. So we have seen that cryptocurrency has become a main source of finance for the Islamic State network. And Munim, who is there, Abdul Qadir Munim, he was in charge of that office. And they raised maybe about a year ago at least $10 million for a year. So they had a very huge budget. I have seen their capabilities. They have drones, GPS, state-of-the-art weaponry, and government forces don't have those capabilities. So I think that to fight the foreign fighters, we have to help them. I saw with deep sadness, and I want all of you to watch Alex Crawford's film. She was just there a month ago, in Puntland, and she filmed how the military forces, the counterterrorism units, are using they are moving their weapons on horseback. So I think that they're using animals to move their weapons. We should equip them with the latest helicopters and with the latest armored vehicles to move and fight this threat.
Thank you for those five pointers to strengthen the system. You mentioned Abdul Qadir Mumin, and I think that's an interesting and powerful personality. He's somebody that we've been watching for very publicly for more than 7 years, coming on 10 years. We know that he's the head of Daesh in Somalia, based out of the federal member state of Puntland. We know that he runs the Al-Qaeda office. We're sure that he is the head of directorates for all of the provinces across Africa. And there's some very strong opinions that he is now actually the leader of Daesh internationally. Whether that's true or not, he's a big personality within the leadership of the group who attracts foreign fighters. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge for Somalia, and Puntland, the federal member state of Puntland, will be at the front lines of that. So that's a challenging thing moving forward. One would hope we might actually get him sanctioned a little bit more globally than he has been, given the amount of information we have had on him for such a long time. You also point to some of the challenges with the kind of finances that are being accumulated by the different groups. It's interesting, if you go back to the Bin Laden papers that were taken from Abbottabad, very early days, Bin Laden was saying, leave al-Shabaab alone. They're a money source, let them get on with it. So we know that for 15, 20 years, there's been monies going into the international pot. So these are not new issues, and we've not yet come to grips with them. So we do need to make sure that there is more focus. But I would say, again, I guess you and I are on the same page that I think international cooperation is really important. But how much of the technical comes from Africa, I would put higher than maybe you've implied in terms of Africa needing to look outside. So I think it's going to be an interesting way to balance. Sometimes horses in mountainous areas can be more effective than helicopters. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going through some of the questions that are already in the chat, and they're just starting to explode the more that you start talking, Professor. So thank you for that. The first one, and Adam's, I think, has always brought up a really solid point. How do we move from theoretical conversations to action? Because a lot of the theory's been there for a long time. As I say, the challenges that we're focusing on, we've been talking about them for more than a decade. So how do we get that into concrete action?
So I believe that we have to support existing counterterrorism programs. If we don't support existing counterterrorism programs, for example, the programs in Somalia, especially in the Puntland, we are going to fail in the fight, because I have seen the capabilities that they have. There's a huge gap. So let's support the existing programs. Second, we will build new programs. And also, what we have done already can be improved. For example, I visited Mombasa, did a training program to build a rehabilitation capacity after interviewing the Al-Shabaab members. I realized that the counterterrorism agencies didn't give a high priority to the non-counterterrorism people who can make rehabilitation a reality. That is the religious clerics, the teachers, the social workers, the artists, the vocational instructors, and the recreational instructors, right? So we have to help them. When I went to Egypt, met with the intelligence service, they told me that their rehabilitation program collapsed because their clerics were not paid, the clerics who do the counseling to the detainees. So I think that we have to have dedicated programs for rehabilitation. There must be a separate office for rehabilitation. So I am urging all the governments here, build your own authority for rehabilitation, your own rules. Don't take from some other agency and do it, because then when you need them for other kinetic operations, you will take those officers. So build a separate agency. That is so important. Turn the ideology around. Another one more aspect on the terrorist finance side. Natasha, you mentioned something very important. What we have seen is we have to work with the banks, the local banks, the regional banks, the international banks. In the collection stage of money, we can detect terrorist money. In the movement stage, we can detect money. In the storage phase, we can detect money. In the dispersal stage, we can detect money. But we can only detect money if the counterterrorism financial intelligence units of the police and the government services work with the private sector. So this public-private sector cooperation is very important. The same thing I said this, work with the digital agencies, the infocoms agencies, work with the educational institutions, including the higher education institutions. One is to prevent infiltration of those institutions. Second is to build a norm and ethic against extremism. So I think fighting this threat is working with not only within government, but working with the community organization, with academia, and with the private security industry.
Yeah, and I've been really impressed with the engagement by the telcos and the banks in Somalia in terms of starting to restructure things like know your customer, so that actually you can start tracking monies and entry points. But it's been starting out, as I say, from these very young institutions. So what might seem like small steps in my home country of Australia are actually massive pieces of infrastructure to put in place. And so, yeah, I can't agree more in terms of the financial piece. Really, really powerful message. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a question from the floor and then back to the written chat. What I ask people on the floor is we don't really want very long statements. I know I've done a lot of that already, but I ask you to keep your questions a little bit focused, just because there's a lot coming up. So Priya, can we start with you because you put your hand up in the chat earliest?
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. This is very enriching for me to listen to this topic from experts, and thank you, Dr. Gunaratna, for giving us an insight on this. Very brief introduction. I'm Priyadarshini Barua, and I'm a research associate with the Indian Air Force Allied Think Tank in New Delhi. And my work is primarily on terrorism and radicalization, studying the trends and patterns in South Asia. So, Dr. Gunaratna, I had a question for you with regard to terror financing, and also Ms. Natasha. Also, you touched upon terror financing bits and pieces in Afghanistan, and also Dr. Rohan also mentioned about Abigail attacks. Could you throw more light on the hub and spokes model of the terror financing which Islamic State, ISIS or ISKP is using? And because we've seen a connection, a inflow of money that is coming from Somalia into Afghanistan and then dispersing further into South Asia. So it'd be really nice if we can mention a little about this.
What we have seen is that the Islamic State Khorasan province is a very promising branch of the Islamic State for external operations. They did the attacks in Iran. In Turkey, they attacked a church that I visited personally. They attacked Moscow, the theater there, and they planned at least a dozen attacks in Europe and Europe that was disrupted because the European intelligence services work very closely with each other. And for some of their attacks, the funding came through the Islamic State East Africa province, including there was a very significant transfer before the Abigate bombing. So what we are seeing is that the group that is based in Puntland is unable to carry acts of international terrorism. They are just creating a base for their operations to survive. But the resources that they have collected through extortion and through business and through taxation, they have sent this money to other Islamic State entities to mount attacks. So the Puntland forces, my colleagues who are there, I believe that some of them are present at this event. If they feel comfortable, I think that you can, both of you can connect and they will share greater details of this involvement. Most recently, Alex Crawford, who traveled to make a movie about the Puntland forces, was able to gain unprecedented insight into the cryptocurrency movement for these long-range operations.
And really, if we look at the office in Somalia of ISIS, they specifically haven't been engaged operationally because that's kept them less of a target and allowed them to focus on the financial and operational planning in other areas. So strategically, that's been a very useful tool for them over the years. It's interesting to look at how much cryptocurrency is becoming a real feature of terrorist financing, but also to not forget that very old school methods of moving money still exist. It is still happening in suitcases worth of cash. It is still happening in very small telephone banking transfers every time people cross a checkpoint. It is still happening in just below that 10,000 euro limit of moving funds. So we need to be as flexible as the groups themselves are in not forgetting about the new things. We need to be very proactive in the areas of cryptocurrency and other digital transfers, but not watch the shiny ball, not chase the new thing at the expense of the old tools, which we've not yet managed to overcome as well. So that, I think, is a really difficult challenge. And you're also looking at quite different methods of operation between ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So again, it's needing to be very focused on what is the challenge within your geographic area, who's doing what, how are they doing it, and knowing that despite ideology, despite franchise competition, all groups are learning from each other. And that, whether that's far-right extremists from the West, or it's fundamentalist ideas coming from groups like ISIS, they're teaching each other, even though they would never speak to each other. So that's a really important point. I see that our director and founder, Isaac has his hand up. So please, can I give you the floor, Isaac, before coming back to the questions? You're on mute. I can do another question and come back to you if you're having some struggles with the audio. So what we'll do is let Isaac sort out his audio, and then I'm going to move down to one of the other questions before we come back to his comments.
Yes, I'm back. Can you hear me?
You've beaten me.
Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, I sincerely thank to Professor Rohan for your invaluable contribution today's discussion, and also extend our gratitude to all participants for joining and engaging this with us. I also apologize for the interruption during the session. Unfortunately, it was caused by an attempt at cyber description. I think they wanted to disrupt us, but no problem. We managed to fix. I have two questions. One is I wanted to follow up on one point you mentioned, Professor, regarding the foreign fighters, in particular Asian joining ISIS and fighting in Puntland. So how these individuals are typically recruited and joining these groups. My second question is whether their home countries are actively following up or implementing measures to address this issue. Thank you very much.
Isaac, thank you for that wonderful question. I want to be brutally frank. Many of the home countries, they want to get their nationals back, but they have not been able to secure that cooperation. So I make a plea through this video conference to my colleagues who are here from the Puntland Counterterrorism Force, to those nationals you have either killed in counterterrorism operations or captured in counterterrorism operations, link up with their home countries so that those countries will assist you, work with you, and if necessary, after you have sentenced them in Puntland, they will also take back their citizens. There'll be repatriation. And they will stop other nationals, they will stop their own nationals from their own countries coming to Somalia. Because there is something called the chain migration of these foreign terrorist fighters. Perhaps something we should do as a result of this meeting is to work closely and give our maximum assistance to the Puntland security forces, because I have seen in the last 48 hours very significant communication from that area to certain countries in Asia. There is a place called the Goli Mountains, and it is from those mountains where some of these terrorists are operating. And I think that there must be extraordinary effort by governments that have the capabilities to help Somalia to dismantle those pockets of IS and the pockets of course, Al-Qaeda from continuing in the Horn of Africa. As long as these two groups are active in Africa, Africa will not become prosperous. The economic effort will be constantly stifled. So this is the best time for us to work together and to reply with appropriate force and, of course, diplomacy with those countries from which these nationals have come, to ensure that there is no more free flow of foreign terrorist fighters.
I'm very pleased to hear your optimistic outlook on Asian countries in terms of taking back their...
Thank you very much, Professor. So we are happy to, we can establish relationship with the Puntland Authority. So yeah, we'll discuss offline. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Isaac. Yeah, as you say, I'm very happy that you feel there is good opportunities with Asian governments to take back their foreign fighters, because if we move to Al-Hol in Syria, one of the really challenging issues has to be to repatriate, and particularly from European and other Western countries. There's been some amazing lessons learned from Iraq in terms of the repatriation, reintegration. There's been some amazing lessons learned from some of the stans in a very similar way. But the number of Europeans who have been very keen to leave their nationals there, or indeed to look at a very significant player like Abdulkadir Mumin, with strong European connections that haven't been able to leverage the kind of action that we might have liked to see. Now, I know a lot of people have in their minds a 4:15 end. We've also said we're going to go to 4:30 or time zone, quarter past the hour or half past the hour. So if there's people who have to leave, we understand we're going to keep recording. But Professor, if you're happy to still take another few questions, that will be absolutely fantastic. I have one that I should probably save for the end, but he was one of the earliest ones to ask a question, and that was Henry, who wanted to know. Sorry, Adam, who wanted to know how long is it going to take us to solve this challenge across the continent of Africa? Is it something that we can put timelines on, or is it an open-ended challenge?
The threat of terrorism in Africa will be a persistent one. It will last beyond our lifetime. It is because, like crime, we are witnessing crime every day, we will witness terrorism. So we have to develop the institutions, the laws, the capabilities to fight this threat. But it is not only to fight them militarily. I think we need to train African leaders to do it. Do not allow foreign Islam to come to Africa. What do I mean by foreign Islam? Don't bring Islam that is in Pakistan or in Saudi Arabia to come to Africa. Make sure that you have African Islam, because African Islam is very tolerant, very moderate, and value coexistence. So wherever there are Salafi, jihadi groups that are active, make sure that any cleric who come from those countries is denied entry to Africa. Do not allow foreign clerics to come to Africa. They have no business to come to Africa. Close your doors to them. And if you ever witness anyone who is a radical cleric coming to Africa, put him in jail and let it be a big lesson. Fighting terrorism should start with controlling the ideology. Second is monitor all the mosques and the madrasas and the Islamic organizations. Create Islamic institutions to do it, because 99.9% of the Muslims don't want extremism. They do not want terrorism. Islam is a beautiful religion, but it has been infiltrated. So I personally believe that we have to work through the Muslim organizations, create national Muslim councils that are working with the Christians, working with the other religions to build social cohesion in your country. Do not allow your beautiful faith to be compromised by political Islam that is coming either from Asia or coming from the Middle East. If you allow that, your terrorism will be persistent. This is number one. Number two is that you have to have very good control over your schools, where you build champions of peace, ambassadors of harmony. You create harmony centers in every university. In every province, you create a harmony club so that people will recognize people as humans, not that someone is a Christian or someone is a Muslim or someone is a Jew. So build friendship across the religions. This is so important. And finally, invest in building leaders, far-reaching leaders. Give them opportunities to travel. Give them opportunities to see the world so that they will come with this great vision to build Africa into one of the most prosperous continents in the world. So national security is the base. If you have good national security institutions, you will have social harmony. If you have social harmony, you will have political stability. If you have political stability, you will have economic prosperity. This should be the vision of everyone at today's event.
Thanks, Professor. I'm going to move to another hand up, but can we also keep in mind that there are those who are claiming to operate in the name of Islam who are just simply after power and manipulating existing tensions. So it's not even coming from these very radicalized voices that are not the core of Islam and are certainly not the core of Africa, but it's also very manipulative individuals looking for power, and they're not necessarily going to be exactly the same way to manage them. Brian, I see that you've had your hand up on and off. Are you still keen to pose a question? You are on. You're there.
Thank you so much. I don't know whether you can hear me clearly, please.
Yes. You're good.
Thank you. I was battling my network here, so I keep on raising my hand, and my network keep on going. Thank you so much for this time. And just in a minute, allow me to congratulate our good Professor Rona here. You have exactly said what I expected. So I really love what Professor have said. And I also would wish to get a book, a copy from our guest, Emeka, so that I can read and see. But just permit me to give my view before I ask Professor one question. I'm sorry, I am international relations expert, so I really love issues relating to peace and security, and that is why I enjoy sitting in this platform. And looking at terrorism, I feel that on
we
my
need a
own
question, Brian.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let me just go straight to the question. I really wanted to know what Prof thinks about digital radicalization on youth, because what we see right now, we see battlefield shifted right from the battlefield to the internet, to the internet. So I really wanted Prof to tell me what he thinks about digital radicalization in relation to combating terrorism in Africa.
Brian, you have asked a very important question that I didn't address until now. The governments of Africa should develop far-reaching measures, especially legislation, to ensure that the digital space or the virtual space is not full of extremist content. Today, a child growing up in Africa can go to an extremist website and join that extremist organization. So African governments must take firm action to remove that content, working with the tech companies. And African governments must build the laws. If the tech companies are not going to remove that content within a specific time frame of 1 or 2 hours, the executives of those companies will be investigated, charged, prosecuted, fined, and imprisoned. So there must be very tough laws to regulate the cyberspace. Cyberspace is even more important today for the youth and the children than the physical space. So I thank you for the question. And I think that if any of you want to have a draft legislation to develop the appropriate laws, please contact ISAC. I'm going to give a bundle of those laws so that you'll be able to protect your space. In parallel, you must have something to protect your country from online falsehoods and manipulations. There's a lot of fake news. For example, recently, someone sent me a video saying that 9/11 attack was done by the Mossad or by the CIA. It was an inside job. Don't believe in all this rubbish. So don't become conspiracy theorists, right? There's a very detailed 9/11 study. Read it. right? Look at the court records. Read Washington Post, read New York Times, read the credible newspapers, and make sure that you read real books. Don't learn from the social media. If you learn from the social media, you will know your knowledge will be full of fake news. So there are a lot of things we can do to counter the type of threats we are facing in the early 21st century. So protecting the cyberspace is paramount.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
Prof.
for that.
Thank you.
And one of the things that I'm old, so one of the things I see a lot in life is there are a lot less conspiracy theories and a lot more incompetence in the world. So don't revert to conspiracy as your first answer. I'm going to ask one more question, which is a bit of an amalgamation from questions that are in the chat. Then we're going to have a final chance for the Institute team to make some comments before letting you give us an outgoing thought if you have one, Professor. And the final thing is there's a couple of questions. It's really going back to the point that you made of the importance in finding good partners that are possibly in the continent, but probably outside of the continent, and the challenges that have been in place in those outside interests, not necessarily having built stronger systems for the internal challenges within Africa, that they might come with other costs and compromises that are or can be seen to undermine sovereignty. Have you got any thoughts on how states can make those partnership choices in a way that's going to really protect them and benefit them? Does that make sense?
I'm going to give a very honest response. The Americans are 20 years ahead of counterterrorism of all the nations. The Europeans are 10 years ahead. Africa, Asia, Middle East still struggling. Work with the Americans, work with the Europeans. Europeans means Europeans, Australia, New Zealand included, because these countries are also willing to help you. Don't discard them, don't abandon them. Sometimes they may have their own views. Discuss with them, have a dialogue with them, but work with them. And eventually you will become as good as them. You are as good as the people you work with. Now, I have seen most recently Saudi Arabia. I visited Saudi Arabia at the invitation of the government. I visited the Al Hair prison. It's a fabulous prison, 6,000 detainees, of which about 4,000 are religious clerics. So Mohammed bin Salman is taking decisive action against extremism in Saudi Arabia. But the same clerics are operating in Africa before, and they are still in Africa. So for this, you can't use foreign partners. For this, you have to use your own religious institutions, your own councils, your own wise people. For example, if you have wisdom, you will never allow Muslim Brotherhood to operate in Africa, because that is the genesis of political Islam. Keep religion and politics aside so that you can build your countries. So on some projects, work with the Western nations. Other projects, you build your own capabilities. Countries that have faced threats, big threats. For example, Pakistan faced a major threat when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Pakistan became the staging pad to fight the Soviet invasion. Of course, the threat came to Pakistan. You see, today Pakistan is fighting a huge battle against terrorism and extremism. Some of its madrasas are still infiltrated. You have madrasas in Africa that have identified with these extreme organizations. Dismantle them. Take decisive action against them. Don't ever fear to take action against radicals who spread the wrong and the hateful ideology. You are able to fight it, do it. Rely on the Western nations to build certain capabilities, but you yourself build your own domestic and regional capabilities.
Thank you for that. And no more hands up, I'm afraid, because we've come to time. One thing to add, Africa has one of the larger challenges with terrorist groups controlling territory. That is not something that either the US or Europe has been successful in combating. So broaden your list of partners in terms of the technology, in terms of the kinetic aspects, in terms of the intelligence output. I'm 1,000% with the professor. But in terms of actually taking back territory, that is a challenge. Now, I'm afraid we're coming to the end of the questions, but I will open the floor to my two colleagues, Isaac and Abdi, to make any final interventions if they have them.
Could I make one last comment?
Yes,
That
sir.
is,
No, we're going to finish with you, of course.
in the last decade, we saw two terrorist insurgent group or insurgent terrorist groups came to power. One in Afghanistan, the Taliban returned. Another in Syria, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham came to power. The next group that will come to power is Al-Shabaab. So I want to alert all of you, ensure that you work with the government in Somalia, provide them that assistance to dismantle Al-Shabaab. I have seen the terrorist activities of Al-Shabaab. They have no place. They should have no place, no capability to operate. So you have to take decisive action against Al-Shabaab. Make sure that terrorist groups do not operate. I've traveled extensively in Libya as a child. When I was 16 years old, my father took me to Africa. And the first country I visited was Libya. Today, there are certain pockets controlled by various groups. We should assist those governments to ensure that these groups do not control territory. In Africa, there are 6 other locations where the threat groups are controlling territory. And we have to build capabilities. Irrespective of in which territory these groups are operating, we have to support the government to which that territory belongs to incapacitate and decimate those groups. So if we don't do that, Africa will not become that prosperous continent in the 21st century.
Thank you, Professor. We've finished with the questions, Priya. So just any final short interventions from my colleagues, Abdi and Isaac, before we thank the professor properly.
I just wanted to say, well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to apologize for the earlier interruption. It was an external intrusion, and but the room is now secure. We're very glad to have a professor with us today. Congratulations, Professor, on your recent book, the Palgrave Handbook of Terrorism in Africa. It's an important work that offers deep insights into terrorism on the continent and provides valuable policy guidance. Thank you, Professor, and thank you all. Thank you to all participants for your patience and patience today. That's all I wanted to say. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for attending.
Abdi, and thanks for managing that intrusion.
Yeah, thank you very much. We sincerely thank Professor and for his valuable time and insights, and we extend our gratitude to all participants for joining and engaging in today's session. So as Abdi said, this was threat, but we managed. This incident affected our network and disrupted the experiences of some of our audiences. And finally, the recording of today's session will be shared with all participants shortly. Thank you for your understanding and continuous support. Thank you very much, Natasha, for your professionalism, and also we really appreciate your support. Thank you, Professor, and all the participants.
Thanks, Isaac. And be reassured that all of the information that's been talked about, a lot of the links you've already had, there will be a follow-up email also with other things that have been spoken about. The professor mentioned a list of foreign terrorist fighters. He and Isaac will coordinate on that. So get in touch with the Institute if you have other specific questions. Professor, we've clearly scratched the surface of your experience. And there's a lot more that people would like to discuss. I can only say thank you very much. This institute is going to continue doing weekly peace talks. The topics will vary. The format will vary. Sometimes we're going to have amazing conversations with individuals like the professor. Sometimes we'll do a panel. We're really trying to upskill all of our community and also give our young researchers a chance to present the work that they're doing. So it's a real mix of interventions. But what we've had today from the professor, the heads up of the book that's becoming available, super helpful. Professor, I just leave you to have any parting comments if you do before we close up.
The Horn of Africa Peace and Security Institute is a great organization led by people with a good heart and a good mind. And Natasha, your assistance, your advice is golden to them. And I believe that you will continue to help them. But today I can assure you that we will assist them too. So, but my simple message to you is that all of you should be strong and resilient. You will face many challenges in life, but never even flinch by it. Stand tall and fight, because you have to make a contribution and you have to leave behind a better world than to the world you were born. So I ask all of you to be strong and capable and work together and to fight the threat of exclusivism, extremism, violence, and terrorism with all your heart and with your mind. Thank you.
Professor, very uplifting final words. And on my part, as always, it's an honor and a privilege to work with the Institute, to work with Isaac and his vision, to work with Abdi, who's doing all of the things behind the scenes. Thank you all for engaging, and we're looking forward to the next time that we can come together.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks again, Professor Natasha. Have a great day.